And this, the first one that we're going to look at here is the David R. Hawkins Levels of Consciousness. Now, this was, David Hawkins was kind of a legend of a man. He passed away a few years ago. He was very much an incredible philosopher, and he was a kinesiologist, and he measured through muscle testing over 10,000 people with 100% accuracy the vibrational frequency of these emotions. And with 10,000 people from Japan to America to all around the world, they all came up with these exact same numbers. So, I mentioned yesterday that we have these photons of light in our body that we can measure, and each cell vibrates at around an average of 1.4 hertz, with 50 trillion cells on average in the human body. We have around 700 trillion hertz of energy in our body that can be measured and tested. And we know that, and we all have these experiences, that sometimes we are feeling kind of this contraction, right? This contraction of energy, this heaviness that can come over us. And what he was able to establish is, if you look at this chart here and look where the orange bar is, you'll see at the top of the orange bar under his area here, we have pride sitting at a number of 175. We go to anger, which is a vibrational frequency of 150, desire 125, and then we get down into fear, which oscillates at 100, grief at 75, apathy at 50, guilt at 30, and shame at 20. Look at where guilt and shame lie. They're huge. And so what this means is, the lower this number, the denser the energy, the denser the vibrational frequency becomes. And where our consciousness flows, energy goes. So as we're thinking and we're feeling these emotions, this is sending the signals to every cell in our body. Our thoughts, this is incredible about what they've discovered. Our thoughts and our emotions themselves have a unique chemical makeup that our body's physically producing. And they have found on the cells in our bodies receptor sites for the molecules of emotion. This was some amazing work that a woman called Candace Pert did about 20 years ago. She was an incredible scientist and researcher, and played a big role actually in insulin, I believe, and understanding receptor sites. So we know, let's talk about the physical body here for a moment. We understand that, insulin is released as a byproduct of the release of glucose. As we eat our carbohydrates, glucose comes into the body. That signals the body to release insulin, the hormone insulin, from the pancreas. And insulin's job is to bond with insulin, right? So it will grab the insulin and it will take the insulin to the cell wall, and it will knock on the cell wall, right? So insulin will bond with the receptor site. So a receptor site is like a lock and key situation. It will open up the wall of the cell and allow the glucose inside the cell. Glucose cannot penetrate into cells on its own. So this is important, swinging this back to the ketogenic diet here just for a moment, and I'll link this back to our emotions, which is very important. If that excess glucose isn't bonded with insulin, if we have insulin problems or we have way too much carbohydrate at one time, the body has to repair. It has to actually remove glucose from the body, because glucose is incredibly damaging to every cell in our body. So the body is literally trying to remove the damage that we have put in through what we're eating. What's interesting about this is that when we flip into nutritional ketosis, which is our birthright, there's a very high vibrational frequency diet. It is very good for reducing stress and emotional stress. It really helps us ascend up the scale, girls, I'm telling you, that's why I promote this program, why I promote this diet. What happens is that we release ketones from our body, and it doesn't require a receptor site. Why do you think it doesn't require a receptor site? If we think about that, the ketones are absorbed straight into the mitochondria. Why? Because that's actually how we're supposed to be fueled. When we get into emotional states, we are releasing peptides, we're releasing proteins as a response of our nervous system, of a response of our consciousness, our energy and motion, our emotions. And those proteins will assemble into particular peptides to match the emotional vibrational frequency we're in. So there are molecules for anger, there are molecules for guilt and shame. And just like that, there are molecules in the body for courage, for strength, for love, right? So this changes the alchemy of the mind, body, spirit connection, doesn't it? Because if we have receptor sites on our cells that are actually opening the doorway, all of our emotions are penetrating into the cells of our body. Now, what do you think that does over time? It's changing the vibrational frequency, this Hertzian energy that's coming from our cells. It's changing the photons of light in our body. And that is how our emotions cause disease in our body. So we can look at health and well-being from many paradigms, but the hierarchy of this is consciousness. It's how we think. It's how we feel about ourselves. It's the frequency of our emotional state that ultimately activates genetic expression and deactivates it. So we are born with thousands and thousands of genetic potentials. Our thoughts, through the research of epigenetics, they have come up with a hierarchy of this, and our thoughts ultimately control which genes are activated to express and which ones aren't. So we can activate negative genetic expressions, and we can activate positive genetic expressions. So this is fascinating, isn't it? Doesn't that change the way we look at the paradigm of well-being, of medicine? So we have got a dysfunctional society of sickness and disease. Our medical systems are bursting at the seams, and they will reach a tipping point. We cannot maintain the current way that we are viewing our health and well-being, where we're basically told to eat as much crap and shit as you want, pump all those chemicals into your body that's going to alter healthy genetic expression. It's going to create toxicity in the body. It's going to give you insulin resistance, which most people in the world are dealing with. And it's going to create early death. But don't worry about that, because we've got you with our pharmaceutical pills. And don't worry about your thinking. Thinking has nothing to do with it. Your ability to be happy, no, just get depressed, because here's these anti-anxiety tablets. Here's these multi-billion-dollar depression meds. We've got you covered. This is really about assigning all of your well-being to something outside of you, instead of understanding that the true healing comes from you. You are your true healer.